If you don't know me, I'm Allison Cashman. I'm president of IDSA at OSU's chapter, and Blaine Hafen is our vice president helping put on the event tonight. For those of you who don't know, IDSA at OSU serves as a tool to bridge the gap between students and professionals, as well as strengthen the design alumni community by hosting events like this one throughout the school year, focused on creating more fruitful design education experience for our current students. And our Disney Imagineers are responsible for the creation, design, and construction of the Disney theme parks and attractions worldwide. So joining us tonight are designers Cory Justice, Mark Hummel, and Michael Murray. So starting with Cory, can you all describe your position or title at Disney, and then just give us a brief background just for the beginning of this night on some of the work you did?
Sure. Yeah. I'm going to start off by saying that unfortunately, due to the pandemic, we are all former Disney Imagineers, but we still know a lot about being an Imagineer and how to get there. So I'm Cory. I went to Ohio State, and I have a background in architecture. I went to the Knowlton School of Architecture and graduated in 2015. While at Ohio State, I was also on the synchronized swimming team and got a couple national championships under my belt, which is nice. Fun fact. And from there, I graduated and worked in Columbus a little bit at some local architecture firms, worked at Ohio State for a minute with their architecture program. And then I went to a conference with Ohio State and I met my boss at Disney. And so networking is what ultimately got me the job at Disney Imagineering. And 9 months after I met him, I packed up my bags from Columbus and moved to LA. And then I worked at Disney until this spring. So I worked there for 2 years. I was just at my 2-year mark.
Yeah. Awesome. So hi everyone, I'm Mark. So I was also at Imagineering and was unfortunately let go as well. But while I was there, it was a great time. So I was a show set designer is the name of the role technically. And that's, I think, what you were too, right, Cory?
Yes, I was in show set and I did prop design for a little bit too.
Okay, there you go. So yeah, show set designer was my title. And I was there for about 1.5 years as a contractor and worked on mainly only one attraction in particular, which is the Spaceship Earth ride at the Epcot park. So if anyone's unaware of what that is, it's the ride that actually exists inside of that golf ball looking geodesic dome that's right there in the center of Epcot. So there's a ride inside of that, and that's what I was working on. And at the very end, as things were getting a little crazy and we were working from home a little bit, I was lucky enough to get onto the project that Cory was working on. That's where I met Cory, and I had worked with Michael a little bit already, so we were friends. And so that one that Cory's going to show you in a bit was a sort of water attraction walkthrough. So I worked on that for a little bit. And then my background, really, I studied architecture as well at Colorado. And then I did a master's degree in industrial design at the Art Center College of Design in California. And through alumni there, I was able to find my way into Imagineering. So that's sort of a really quick version of my background. And funny enough, I actually used to build props as well. So between school, before I went to get my master's degree, I actually built some of the Hollywood props for some movies like Star Trek and stuff like that, which was really exciting. It was a crazy job, a lot of work, but it was fun. So that kept me in sort of like the whole movie entertainment world. So yeah, that's me. I'll let you take it, Michael.
All right, thanks, Mark. My story would take the rest of the hour, so I'm not going to go into too much detail. Suffice it to say, back in the day, I moved to LA to do movies and TV, I had done a couple of movies. You might have heard of RoboCop or Streamers, directed by Robert Altman, or some of those. What was the other one? Places in the Heart, where Sally Field won her Oscar, and she said, "You like me, you really like me." Anyway, so I taught her how to do the Texas two-step too, by the way. Fun fact. That'll be a quiz later. Anyway, so when I came out to LA, I had a hard time getting hired because everything was union at the time. I had the talent, I just didn't have the union card. And every time they'd get close to having somebody, you know, needing some people, they decided that George Lucas was through with that film, so 20 people went back on the list, and so I got kind of pushed back, and I finally got a job as an art director doing daytime dramas. And if any of you understand what daytime dramas are, you win the prize. So I worked on shows, 2 shows, one called The Bold and the Beautiful, and another one called The Young and the Restless, and I was an art director there and got my art director's union card finally. And then there was a director's strike, and there was no work, and there was very little rice and beans in my cupboard. But somebody said, "Hey, Disney's getting ready to build a park in Paris. Why don't you call them?" So I called them up, and I thought, wow, this is kind of interesting. I took a huge pay cut to work there, but there wasn't going to be the idea that after 9 months, I'd have to look for a new show and hope the show I was on didn't get canceled, or that next movie was going to actually happen if they didn't pull the financing. So I went to work at Disney in July of '87, and I worked there until December of last year. So 33 plus years, and it's been a great ride. It really has. It's been a great ride. And somebody was saying, how many attractions have you worked on? And it's gone. I can't remember. I tried once to make an Excel list of all the attractions, and I got to like 40 and said, no, I can't remember anything else. Because some of them I worked very intensely for 2 months, just doing one particular thing, and then I was done with that, and I went on to something else. Anyway, so that's my story, and I'm going to stick to it for the time being.
Great. Well, we are really excited to have you guys here with us tonight at IDSA. And we would like to kick things off with a really quick icebreaker activity. We are going to be sketching Mickey Mouse from memory in 4 minutes, and it's going to be to the tune of Hakuna Matata, but there is a catch. We would love it if you could include within your sketch some elements of you personally, your interests, things like that. So for example, if you're a sci-fi fan, you can draw a Mickey with an astronaut helmet on. And then after Hakuna Matata has finished, we'll have you each just show it off, show us your sketch, tell us what you incorporated in. And the idea is that we'll gain better insight into who you are as people and sort of your creative passions. Attendees, please feel free to sketch along with us. I'm gonna be doing it as well, just for fun. And if you'd like to, post it on Instagram and tag IDSA OSU, and your picture may end up getting posted on our Instagram as well. So we'll give it here like 20 seconds, and Allison will share her screen and she'll kick off Hakuna Matata for us. Okay, now that we all have that song stuck in our head and a 4-minute Mickey sketch down in front of us, we would love to see what our Imagineers drew. If we can start with Cory again, just talk a little bit about the elements you incorporated and why you did so.
This is mine.
I love it.
Thank you. So this is my Mickey, and he has Pluto with him because I am obsessed with my dog. He's wearing some goggles because I was a swimmer and I still swim. The paintbrush because I like to paint and do crafts, and some hiking boots because I like to go hiking.
Nice.
Do not judge me on this, please.
Oh, actually, no, Cory, you're great, because I just went for like a simple Mickey face. You did the whole body.
Oh, wow.
Mine's just supposed to be Mickey wearing a hard hat, but it kind of looks like a weird baseball hat. So I don't know if it really worked out that well, but you know, the other thing I tried to do though is I tried to kind of give him the sort of old style Mickey look, because there's a part of me that sort of likes nostalgia. So I kind of like that older style Mickey. And the hard hat, really, it's just to say, like, I really do see myself as not just a designer, but also an engineer. And, you know, even though I didn't study engineering as my major, although I started off in engineering, I was undergrad aerospace engineering for about 2 years before switching. I always see myself as part engineer, part designer, because I think the two are sort of inseparable. And the great thing about Imagineering is that you get to combine all those things. You get to be a designer and an engineer and an artist, and you get to do all of these things together. So yeah.
Nice. All right,
All
Michael.
right. Well, I'm the last one here, and I always draw on trace. So let's see if you can see this.
Ooh, nice.
Now this is because in addition to being a show set designer, I'm also a landscape architect. And this is Mickey at night going through the jungle. I don't know why he's in a jungle, but it was easy to draw, I guess. So anyway, so there you go.
I like it.
Great. Thank you for sharing your sketches. We appreciate it. And it's wonderful to know a little bit more about each of you. So with that, we're going to move into the main portion of our evening tonight. Each of the Imagineers have prepared a small little talk that they're going to give. If you don't know how the Zoom software works, to our panelists, there is a small green share screen button at the bottom of your Zoom window in this interface. You can click that, and then you'll be able to select whichever window you'd like to share. To our attendees, at the end of all three of our panelists giving their talk, we're going to have a short Q&A session, so please save your questions for that. And with that, I will pass it off to Cory once again for the main portion of our evening.
Hey everyone. I did put together a small little presentation. Here we go. No, it's not picking up. Oh, here we go. Don't look yet. Oh man, it's been so long. Okay, so here's me and my information if you want to find me. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions after this. And I just am available if you guys are curious. And that's me right there, if you can see my little cursor. Okay, so here's proof that I went to Ohio State. Just a bunch of pictures of while I was there. I mainly was at the pool or an architecture building and not really anywhere else. So yeah, that's my proof. So when I started out after school, I was mentioning before, I worked at M&A Architects in Columbus, and I loved it there. They're really, really great. I just got offered a job at Disney and I couldn't pass it up. But while I was there, I worked on projects. You might have seen this one around Polaris. This is a new apartment building. I worked on the Big Lots headquarters and a bunch of Raising Cane's, which is a big fan favorite at Ohio State. And then while I was at Ohio State working there, I did some help with the design of Mirror Lake, the new Mirror Lake, which is beautiful. I've seen pictures. I have yet to experience it in person since it's been finished. But and then I also worked on a lot of the medical center planning and the athletic center planning. And then, so I first started out at Disney with this Frozen ride for Tokyo Disneysea. I can't really say a whole lot about it because of it being Disney. But I worked on this project as a show set designer, which is very similar to like an architecture position. We used Revit as our main software program. We also used Rhino to model the funky stuff and brought it into Revit. Other than that, our drawing packages are similar to an architecture style package, if that gives you any ideas. So you have like plans and sections and elevations that all go into the drawings for your project. And this particular project had well over 700 sheets, I'm pretty sure, it was a big one. And it's going to be beautiful, and it's under construction. It looks great. I can't wait to see it. I also worked on the Spider-Man project, which is going to be opening soon in Disneyland, California. It was supposed to open this summer. I was actually doing install on it this spring. But I worked in the props department for this ride specifically, which is not as, I didn't really work on any drawing packages. It was mainly understanding what the artistic director wanted that also matched the theme of the ride, and we'd go and buy props or get them modified by a vendor to put in the ride. So that was really, really fun. And this one will be very cool as well. I don't have any pictures of it under construction, but I'm trying to make this short and sweet. And then my final project that I was on, my last project before the pandemic, was Moana Journey of Water, which all three of us were on. That's how we know each other. And I don't know if you guys you can chime in too. Michael was the lead show set designer on this project. And it was an interactive water walkthrough that's going to be in Disney World.
It's right next to Mark's golf ball geodesic dome there.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what was interesting about this one, Journey of Water, for me especially, is that it's very different from what I had been working on, in a sense that it really is a walkthrough type of ride. So it's meant to be enjoyed sort of at the guest's leisure, as opposed to a ride where there's a very set, pacing to how everything is encountered and the way people experience everything. And because of that, there's also a lot of very different types of elements that you encounter in an environment like this. So it is very cool to see how, depending on what the situation is, it can change quite a lot. It changes a lot about how you do your work as a show set designer.
Yeah, that's the end of my slideshow. It was short and sweet.
Yeah, that's great.
I knew Michael has a lot.
Yeah, mine's mine's actually just as short as yours, or shorter actually. What I can tell you guys, I'll just give a quick background just so you guys know. I know I talked a little bit about myself already, but just in case it maybe helps, being part of IDSA and understanding, how you fit into the world and, all this kind of stuff. I can tell you, so I started out in aerospace engineering when I was undergrad, did that for about 2 years and decided it was kind of boring. So I went into architecture. And kind of like Cory said, I was pretty much in the architecture building all the time. That's pretty much all I did. So a lot of work, but it was really interesting and cool and fulfilling as well. So I took that and I moved to Los Angeles, where I was closer to friends and family. But because of recent recession, there wasn't a lot of building going on. So I actually ended up finding a job doing props. Which was actually really fun. I've always loved painting and building things, and I love movies as well. So it was exciting to be able to work on these things that you see on the big screen. So I'd say some of the coolest things I worked on were the props for, like I mentioned before, Star Trek. And I worked on a really cool movie with Tom Cruise called Oblivion, where we had a lot of fun stuff. But anyhow, it kind of introduced me to this world of entertainment. But from there, I decided I wanted to study more. So I went to do my master's degree in industrial design at Art Center. And that's where I became aware of IDSA. So I was part of that as well. And, you know, my hat's off to Allison and, Will for running this, and Blaine for, also doing this. It's awesome to see you guys, participating and getting out there. So anyhow, I was part of that IDSA when I was at school. And after I graduated, I worked in a number of different small sort of product design firms. Most of them, we would just do whatever kind of projects would come to us. But after a while, I found a better position for myself at a company called Spec, which makes phone cases, which doesn't sound so interesting, but actually it was really cool. And it allowed me to get bigger into the world of how things are actually manufactured. So I actually spent some time traveling to China and Korea to see how things were made and work with some of the cell phone companies over there. And at that point, I was keeping in contact with some of my alumni. So again, I think Cory mentioned this before, it really does pay off and help a lot to be, get yourself out there, be social, be a part of the alumni groups, be a part of IDSA, be a part of things. So through alumni, I was able to connect with Disney, and that's where I got the position for show set designer on the Epcot Spaceship Earth ride. So if I can share my screen, show you guys some of the stuff I did. Okay, so nothing that you can't find online, because Disney is, as Cory said, they're very, very, closed lips about everything, and they don't want to sharing a lot of work, and as much as we want to tell you guys all the fun, cool, interesting stuff, we're not always allowed to do that. So we can share this with you though. So this is one of the overall concept images for the reimagination of Epcot as a whole. So the Epcot park is really the idea of Epcot. It's this experimental prototype community of tomorrow as envisioned by Walt. But right now it really focuses a lot on the world just being a huge place that we can really come together and just be one people. So what they did when they were trying to rebuild it, you can see on this site plan, they broke it into different areas. And the walkthrough ride that all three of Cory, Michael, and myself worked on is in the bottom green area. The ride that I started on was right here in this World Celebration area, so the blue. And really the whole park was getting this massive makeover. And here on this next image, you can see we have a view of the geodesic dome that I was talking about earlier. And this is what we call Dreamer's Point. So this image just shows you kind of what it looks like when you're coming into the Epcot park. And we love working with these concept artists, because they really get our creative juices flowing, and it really helps breathe life into these things. So here you can see a little bit more of Epcot. So a lot of times with show set design, what's cool is that we are working a lot in sort of that capacity, as Cory said, like architects, but there's a lot more that goes into it than just architecture. And I think that's what really made me so excited and interested about Imagineering, is that you wear a lot of hats and you have to know how a lot of things work. So it was a kind of place where you can tell from my background, I've got this sort of weird eclectic background of different things. And a lot of places you go, I hear people say, well, we need a specialist who's just good at this one thing. The cool thing about Imagineering is that it was one of the first places I went to where, when I explained my background and my skill, my skill set, it was one of the first places where people told me, that's perfect. That's what we need. We need somebody who knows a little bit about engineering, a little bit about architecture, a little bit about props, because when you're talking about a theme park, all of these things are coming together. And especially with Disney, we want them to come together so perfectly and flawlessly, that it's just the best experience you could possibly have for the users. So in any event, this shot right here is just an image of what the immediate surrounding area of Spaceship Earth will look like. And we worked a lot with the landscape architecture team and all sorts of designers and engineers to make sure that, you know, we were bringing this to life and making it just the best possible experience we could have. And the last image I could find is one of the few officially released images of what the ride itself is going to look like. If you can imagine, we have concept renderings like this for all parts of the ride. So there's a lot of scenes inside the ride. So we do refer to, you know, these different sections as scenes because, and I think Michael can speak a lot more to the history of this, but as far as my understanding is that, you know, show set design does have a really a kind of close relationship to set design for things like plays and Broadway. So we share a lot of language and imagery and ideas. So we had tons of concept renderings like this for all of our scenes in the ride. But this is one of the ones that was released, so I know it's okay to show to you guys. But what we would be doing, like Cory and Michael and myself, we literally are taking this kind of concept imagery and we are building all of this stuff in Revit. So literally everything you see here, besides the people in the ride, but the people who are not, the people who are sitting off on the side, they actually are there. We're building all of that stuff in, sorry, my phone was ringing, I apologize. We're building all of that stuff in Revit and using Rhino, like Cory was saying. And then we also work with people who are working in things like Cinema 4D and other programs like that, you know, just programs that are better for doing the actual sculpture of people. So we'd create these monster files that are just, you know, massive, and create these gigantic drawing packages out of it. Like what Cory was saying, you know, these things could be, you know, up to, you know, 700 pages long. It's really detailed. And so, you know, one thing I can tell you for sure is that one of the key points of show set design, as it was described to me by my mentor, was that our job as show set designers was to convey as much information as possible about how this ride is going to look and feel and how it's going to be built and how it's going to work, because you want to make sure that at the end of the day, there's no questions about how this works or how that's done or what material this is, or is that supposed to be fireproof, you know, and that's a big part of it. It's a lot of nitty gritty details of just knowing everything that's going on in the ride. And part of that is just at Disney, you know, we would always pride ourselves on being the best of the best. So we wanted to make sure that everything was absolutely as perfect as possible. And so that's, you know, that's what we did. And then with that, Michael, I'll let you go because you most certainly have a lot of information you could share with
Real quick
everyone.
though, this ride is in the Sphere.
Yeah, so this ride is in the Sphere, which
that is crazy to me.
Yeah, and if any of you guys have used Revit, you'll know that Revit does not like spherical shapes. It likes orthogonals and flat things. So this ride was really interesting to work on because it's a giant spherical building with a helioid, you know, like this corkscrew of a ride that's just spinning around in the inside and then coming back down through itself. It was really complex. I'm amazed that our computers didn't crash every time we open this model up.
Yeah, think of the double helix, right? That's
Yep.
probably the closest thing you can think of.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Yeah, so I hope that gives you guys at least a somewhat interesting kind of quick background on it.
Mhm. Well, I don't know if I can top that. I'll do my darndest, Mark. I don't want to embarrass you or Cory.
Oh, come on.
So I'll do the
Michael,
best I can here.
You always.
Let's see here. Let me
I want to be
share.
embarrassed.
I know, right?
You want to be embarrassed? Oh boy.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Which one do I want to share? Well, I guess this is the only one I can share, so I'll share that one. Oops, did I lose anybody?
I think we're
Hello,
good.
am I still there? Okay, all right. I'm sharing the wrong screen. Oops, come on.
You may be able to
Sorry.
minimize your PowerPoint window there,
Yeah.
possibly.
Okay. How's it look? Can you see the big, can you see my
Mhm.
cursor running around there? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the question was which projects that I like the most. And I think that a couple that stick out are Animal Kingdom was one of them. And I was the lead show set designer for the entire park. And so I had a staff of about maybe 25 people to work with. And so one of the things that we did was work on the Tree of Life attraction. And so this is the logo, and this is the actual tree. Now, of course, obviously what you're looking at is man-made, and all of that foliage is it's all artificial foliage, you know. So we had to figure out how many different styles of those little green end branches, they call them, and which way they turned and put them in place. And then there's all this rock work around it that's sculpted. I don't know how many of you attendees have been down there, but it's amazing. Our rock work guys just kind of went crazy, and they put all of these, I don't know how many, there's too many animals to count. We had probably 20 rock work artists who were carving all of these things. It took quite a while, and there's no way to count all the ones that they had. They just went nuts with this stuff, and it's just phenomenal. And of course, I couldn't get away without showing this one, which is what it looks like at night, or in the dusk, I should say. But my part of this thing was more inside. There's a show, It's Tough to Be a Bug, which was a 3D projected show. And when you enter the theater, you go under the tree. So inside of that tree at the bottom is this space, which is meant to look like an ant farm or an anthill. So you're inside an anthill. And this is what it looks like with no people, but lots of fun lighting. And then this is where you enter the theater and you go into it. And if in plan, it looks like most other theaters. But when you get inside, the entire interior of this space is rock work all the way around. And that yellow part is a proscenium that's full of butterflies that fly away. And actually the whole show is projected, except for this guy. And he comes up in the middle of the show, and he's the villain. His Hopper is his name. From his bottom of his feet to the top of his head, he's 6'9". And he had to be hidden and all of a sudden appear like this. And you can't see any of the mechanics. You can't see anything. He weighed about 2,000 pounds total. And there was a big hydraulic jack that had to work silently. And my job was to help place him because he couldn't be in the view of the projectors. And we also had to be able to get at him to repair him. So a lot of what we do, as Mark said, it's kind of like an engineering job. You have to figure out what kind of things that need to be fixed, and then you have to figure out how to get at them. It's not simple, this stuff, a lot of it. This is what the theater looks like, and you'd be surprised. It's a 435-seat theater inside this tree. And you can see up at the top, there's a lot of projection equipment in there. So now we move on to Hong Kong Disneyland and the Tarzan's Treehouse. I was the lead on this park as well. And my personal area of responsibility was Adventureland. So I worked on a lot of Adventureland stuff. And here in the background, you can see the Tarzan tree at the end of the island. And here's some very happy guests going by in a boat. At least I think they're happy. And this is sort of what it looks like. Now you look at this stuff and there's a lot of things here. Let me see, where's my cursor? This way, that way, there it is. Okay. You see things like this. Okay, this is a piece of steel, but it's covered in carvable epoxy, so they carved it to look like wood. The idea here is this is a ship that has wrecked, and this would be the main mast of the ship, and then the ship is from there to there, so it's supposed to look like a shipwreck. Here's the front half of the ship up here in the tree. And this is a walkthrough. I don't know if anybody of you been to Disneyland or Disney World, but this is a walkthrough attraction. So you see a lot of those, a lot of the scenes in here. And this is one of the scenes. This is the bedroom, and this one's based on the Tarzan movie, not the Swiss Family movie like Disneyland. This is the Tarzan movie, and you can see that it's hanging out there in the middle of nowhere. You know, it's just got a bunch of steel in there, but you can't see it. It's all sculpted with this stuff to make it look like a big old tree. And inside there's this guy. So my job on this one was to determine all of this stuff inside. And again, there's lighting back there. There's speakers that we had to get to. There's special effects. There's all sorts of things that you have to make sure that you can get at and repair. Sorry for the quality of this one. I had to get this off the internet because I didn't have any shots of this. This is the main room, and there's the two figures, but you just walk by in front of them. And then another part of Adventureland was the Jungle River Cruise, which is like at Disneyland and like at Disney World. There's a Jungle River, but this one's a little different because it's basically, it goes all the way around the world. It goes into these Indian ruins. And my job was not only to draw all of these pieces of scenery, all of these ruins here, but we had to work with the landscape architects to make sure that the planting that they wanted to do would not be impacted by this stuff. We also had to work with structural engineers because there's a boat going through the middle of that scene. And so you have to make sure the boat's not going to hit anything and that nothing is going to fall on the boat. And if that isn't enough, you have to make sure that nobody can reach out of the boat and grab anything. So those are just the kind of things that we have to coordinate. This is just another shot of a piece, and I drew much of this except for the figure. They found some photo reference, and they went down to Bali where there are amazing carvers, and they said, can you carve this and make it about 9 feet tall but only do half the figure? And they did. So there it is. And there's a Ganesha figure. That's the elephant goddess in the back there. And again, this is the same thing. You just go by this and she makes some sounds, and that's that scene. And then you go to the next one, and there is a tribe of headhunters, apparently. And you go very fast past this so nobody gets you. We don't see them, but they're hiding back there. And our job as show set designer was to coordinate where all of this stuff went. And you can see a couple of the flaming torches there. We had to make sure that the mechanical designers knew that we needed natural gas there. And you had to make sure that the show control designers knew that there was natural gas torches that needed to be controlled, turned on and turned off during the show. So that's the kind of thing that we do. A little farther along, you come to this rocky outcrop, but you've apparently upset some of the gods, because when you approach this thing, the water starts roiling and there's geysers and things, and then you come across the gods of fire and water who don't like you being there. And again, you'll notice in the water there's lots of effects there, lots of flames and things, and so we had to draw a plan of this and show where all these jets were going to go, and realize and make sure that nobody could get at them, could get burned by this stuff, or that the boat wouldn't catch fire. You know, it's just, I mean, it sounds a little basic, but it's important, you know, you got to make sure of that stuff. And somebody has to do it, and it almost always falls to the show set designer because nobody else wants to be responsible for it, so we just end up doing it. And in a lighter vein, we did things like these are called the Leaky Tikis. This was an area, Hong Kong is extremely humid and it's extremely hot. And so they put these in here. These are totems, again, carved in Bali, only this time they're made out of fiberglass. And they squirt you, so you get cooled off. Here's a couple of guys. You can see the ones in the background. They all look different, but they all put out water at different places. And like this little guy is lucky. He's probably standing in about the only dry spot in the entire place. Also, these things are, you know, you can tell they're 8 to 10 feet tall. They have a steel structure inside, and you'll notice in the front of each one of them, there is a sort of a dark vertical slit. Well, each one of these guys has a voice, and they're all different. So there's speakers inside of these with different voices coming out of them. Sometimes they talk, sometimes they sing, but that's the kind, and of course you have to figure out, okay, how do I get at those nozzles if they get clogged? How do you get at the speaker if it stops working? And of course, some of these have lights in them too. So, you know, again, it's a kind of a thing where you have to make sure you can get to everything. Mystic Manor is one of the latest things that I've worked on. That's in, well, I say latest. It opened in 2012, but it's one of the later ones in my career. This is the exterior of the building, and you can see the architects had a great time with this. And the toughest part of this one, in my opinion, was done by the colorists, because the colorists at Imagineering, they will get full elevations of this building, and then they have to go and pick a color. So there's a color for the walls, there's a color for the railings, there's a color for this little trim piece here, there's a color for that. I mean, all this is the same, but you'll see the bracket has a different color, which matches this. And then there's all this little Victorian frou-frou all over here. And of course, then there are big stencil designs up here. And all of these things. So you can see this has a palette of probably 40 colors at least. And that's not on the outside. That's just the outside of the building. So this is a ride that it has a track which is controlled along a wire in the floor and by Wi-Fi. The vehicles are all Wi-Fi enabled, and we have sensors all over the place, and there's a wire in the floor which, in case the Wi-Fi fails, they can still follow. But these are trackless vehicles, so they can stop, they can go sideways, backwards, they can spin around in a circle. And so so that's the kind of ride system this has. This little monkey here, his name is Alfred, and of course, like every other good Disney ride, it starts out being very nice, and then something goes terribly wrong. And so Alfred is not supposed to play with this little box that you see in front of him, but of course he does, because he's a mischievous little twerp, and all of a sudden all this magic pixie dust comes out of there, and you can see the colored lights, which are all projected, by the way. I can't tell you how it's done, but they're all projected. And things go along, and they start going wrong almost from the get-go. I'm going to skip a scene here, but there's this scene where Albert is in the herbarium, and if you've seen the movie Little Shop of Horrors, this is kind of the idea. This is a carnivorous plant, as is this one, and Albert is over here trying to fool with these young ones. And by the way, they all are animated out. You know, Albert and all of these three plants are animated. And so when you leave the scene, Albert has just made an escape from this mama plant there. And then there's a scene where this is called, scene 8 is called Arms and Armor. And we have displays of arms and armor all the way through this. and you can see over on the right-hand side, there's a little circle. It looks like a circle, but that's actually Alfred in a cannon. And things are still going wrong, and this samurai warrior on the right has decided he's going to take a whack at Alfred, and he ducks back inside the cannon as the sword just barely misses him. I want you to take a look in the middle of the picture. There's 3 suits of armor there, and you go right in front of these things. And when I first saw the thing, I started with this, and this is a show model. This is the kind of detail that our model makers and our creative directors ask of our model makers. And so they looked at this and they said, oh my gosh, that's really good. And we drew it up. And of course, in the you know, as you go along, the art director would say, well, I'm not sure I like those arches. The size is right, the props are right, but I don't like the way that arch looks. So that's how it turned out. That's an actual scene, a photograph of the scene as it is. And these are 3 animated heads that sing, and the speakers are behind the red curtain. So you can see that there's a progression of things. And in the same scene, along with the arms and armor theme, is a crossbow. And the minute you leave the suits of armor, and they don't seem to be causing you too much trouble, but as you come into this scene, you go in front of this crossbow, and the crossbow tracks your motion. So that's a little scary. And that crossbow is about 5 feet across. So it's not like a little thing. It's a giant crossbow, and it tracks right along with you in the vehicle. And then it resets for the next vehicle. This is the penultimate scene. It's actually, this is the Monkey King, which is an Asian story. The Monkey King in this scene, you can see on the floor, on the green there, you can see some kind of circular tracks, and that's how close the vehicles get to this guy. He's animated, and he starts waving his staff in a circle. And I want you to look at the walls behind him, okay? Everything that's red in there, you can see the paintings, and you can see the red Chinese kind of patterning on those walls. That's projected. Those walls are flat. So and the projectors are up above in the ceiling. So not only are they projected from a place you can't see, but there's also a fair amount of keystoning that they have to do. And they're also video projectors. These aren't still projectors, they're video. Because as the Monkey King starts waving his wand in a circle, he creates a tornado in that room. And those paintings start flapping in the breeze, and one of them flies off the wall and disappears. This room here, the only thing that's not projected, the 2 vases and the stands that they're on are real, but everything else on that wall is projected. And I'm going to see if I can point it out. It's kind of hard to tell exactly. I don't know if you can see this little line here. Can you see that little black line? It goes through this painting, and then it actually comes up here and goes across there. There are 11 panels in this wall that blow away. If you go onto YouTube, I'm sure you can find this video. I wish I had time to put it together. I didn't have time to grab it. But this wall opens up. The vases topple backwards, and when the wall opens up, you see Alfred and these paintings and parts of the wall go flying away. Again, it's projected on a surface that's behind here. And then right when that happens, you go zipping out of the room. So that's a little bit about the Mystic Manor attraction. And then, of course, everybody's favorite, I'm sure all of you younger folks saw this when you were little. I watched it about 400 times with my kids. And this was I believe the first Little Mermaid attraction at Disney's California Adventure. And this is, of course, the scene. I'm sure you remember all of these characters. So when we do layouts, we actually, on this one, we had a wonderful, what they call a white model. And I don't have a picture of it with me, but a white model is basically everything you see here except for the figures. And the figures were put in like a profile drawing only. So that's what we started the show set from. We had all of the scenes were already modeled. So we basically translated the model into 2D graphics. And actually part of this, we actually modeled the platforms in 3D because we had to make sure all of these figures, or 90% of them, the motors and the equipment to make them work are below. Some lighting, but all of the figures have, animation bases, and they're all buried in the rockwork. So you got to make sure that you can get to them. So some of these have liftoff panels. The ones that are above sight lines, like for Sebastian, he has a liftoff panel that you can't see when you're in the vehicle. But the ones like the blowfish here in front right, the yellow guy, you have to get at him from below, and the same thing with the octopus. So there's lots of things to keep in mind. Here's another shot, and you can see on the ceiling some panels that are hung up there. This was a combination black light and white light. That's another thing you have to keep in mind when you're working with the lighting designers, is what parts of this are white light and what parts of it are in black light. So there's lots of things to think about. And this is a scene that I wanted to put in here. This is actually under work lights. This is not the way the show is. But you can see these in front, there's these lobsters, and they're just cute as the dickens. They did a great job on these things. And you can see all of these pieces of coral, and we had to draw all that coral because somebody's got to sculpt it, and they have to come up with some kind of a framework to support it. So we drew it, and then we roughed in with the structural engineers, we roughed in a small frame, and then the sculptors had something to start with, and so they sculpted on top of that. And then here's another one of these guys. I just love this scene. It's so much fun. I think we had, I can't remember. I think we had 48 animated figures, something like that. I can't remember, something like that. Anyway, so, and there's Sebastian at the end, conducting the orchestra of all these folks singing Under the Sea. And I want to end with a slide, and I'm going to read it to you because there's a lot of words, and I'm sorry for that. And if you want to, you can just tune out for a minute and take a screen grab of this thing. But here's a quote that I think applies certainly to me, but probably to everybody listening to this thing. Nobody tells this to people who are beginners. I wish someone had told me. All of us who do creative work, we get into it because we have good taste, but there's this gap. For the first couple of years, you make stuff, but it's just not that good. It's trying to be good. It has potential, but it's not. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, is still killer. And your taste is why your work disappoints you. A lot of people never get past this phase. They quit. Most people I know who do interesting creative work went through years of this. We know our work doesn't have this special thing that we want it to have, and we all go through this. If you're just starting out or you're still in this phase, you've got to know it's normal. And the most important thing you can do is do a lot of work. Put yourself on a deadline so every week you finish one piece. It's only by going through a volume of work that you'll close that gap, and your work will be as good as your ambitions. And I took longer to figure this out than anyone I've ever met. It's going to take a while. It's normal to take a while. You just got to fight your way through. And I don't know how many of you know Ira Glass, but he does podcasts, and he's NPR podcast. The guy's brilliant. Anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for putting up with
Michael.
Yeah, great quote too.
Yeah,
I thought
I
that
really like that
quote was very important.
Perfect. Well, thank you
Yay.
all of the Imagineers and the wonderful insights you had about some of your work. We want to wrap things up tonight with just a very short Q&A session. I think we're just going to limit this to 3 questions. So if you're an attendee and you'd like to ask a question, type it into the chat here and I can read them out. So we have one from Allison Krish. What is the makeup of teams in terms of what people studied in college? Does this affect the way work is allocated in a team?
That's a great question. I mean, Michael, you've met far more people than either Cory or I have, but I can tell you that it was really interesting to see how many people had studied architecture in the show set department. I know that was a really big background for a lot of us. Interestingly enough, not all of us who had studied architecture, in fact, I think most of us had not even gone through the process of actually getting our architectural license. So we, had studied architecture, we just never really were licensed in it. But there are a lot of industrial designers as well. If you're looking at the engineering teams, a lot of structural engineers. We need tons of people who know plumbing, electrical engineering. The R&D teams are kind of a mixture of all types of engineers like that. But I think to answer part of the last bit of your question there is, at least in my opinion, it's interesting that just because you studied one thing or another doesn't mean that you can't be an Imagineer, and it certainly doesn't mean you won't be a successful Imagineer, because it really comes down to what you push yourself to know, and the things you do, the amount of work you put into understanding all sorts of different subjects. So sometimes it can be tough because they do look for certain schools or certain certain titles when they're looking for degrees, but really I think what makes a successful Imagineer is somebody who really throws themselves into their work and just puts puts everything they got into it. I don't know what you two think about that.
I feel like we had people from all over the place who worked in different areas, so it doesn't necessarily mean that there was an architecture portion for these rides, and I had architecture background, but I wasn't in that area. I was in the show set area, or I went to props. I have no experience with props or industrial design, but I still went to props because I had some show set experience. I don't know.
Well, in the show set realm, you have to work with everybody. I mean, you're working with structural engineers, mechanical, show control, AV, projection effects. I mean, you work with everybody. Landscape. I went back to school when I was much older, not quite as old as I am now, but I went back to school for landscape architecture. It took me 5 years, nights and weekends. And I worked in landscape for Shanghai Disneyland. So that was a lot of, and I apologize for not having pictures. I just got them yesterday and I wasn't unable to get through them to get them on this slideshow. But you learn to work with everybody. And, I'll tell you what, the most important thing about Imagineering for anybody, and I don't think it's necessary germane only to Imagineering, but don't be afraid to say, I don't know how to do that. Never be afraid to say that, because there's always somebody there who can help you. And what you don't want to do is go in and say, yeah, I know how to do that. And then you say, well, I guess I lied. I didn't know how to do it. Never be afraid to ask for help. You just can't. You'll never get anywhere if you just try to do it on your own. And the other thing is to be a team player.
Yeah.
You know, you might have the best idea in the world. And if a vice president comes along and says, I don't like it, change it, you can't be the one to sit there and say, my idea is the best and you can just go suck an egg. You know, you can't do that because that's the vice president. So you just have to say, okay, do you have any suggestions? You cannot be so married to an idea that you can't change. You have to be flexible in your thinking. And I don't care if you're just coming out of school or if you're like me. God knows in the past 10 years, I've had to change a lot of my designs because somebody didn't like it or because it didn't work, you know, and sometimes you just have to be willing to accept little setbacks along the way and keep your eyes on the prize further down the road. Or am I mixing metaphors there? Well, anyway, you get the gist.
Certainly. I think we can kind of combine these next two questions here. And it's dealing with a little bit of concept design and then the entire process of your work on a project. So the first is, what is the difference between what you do and what concept designers do? And when you were involved in a project, did you start from ideation phase all the way to construction, or was there a specific part of the process that you focused on?
For me, I came onto each of the projects after they were already past the ideation phase. So I didn't have experience in there. But we do get a lot of like concept art or just like, here's a sketch, make this. And then we have to model it in Revit. So we still had a lot of that sort of thing as we're going through the project, but I don't know if.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, I'm the same as Cory. I came onto projects sort of in the middle part of the project. So a lot of the blue sky thinking and the ideation had already happened. And the phase that show set designers really put a lot of work into is the construction documentation and making sure everything is all set that way. But it's interesting. It doesn't mean that you can't be a part of the project from start to finish. I think a lot of times the creative directors, people who are a little bit higher up, those are the kind of people who will be on a project all the way through from beginning to end. A lot of times show set designers, they might, depending on what needs doing, they might throw you from one project to another, which can be really exciting because you see a lot of things. It can be a little frustrating because it's really great to see a project through from beginning to end. But to answer the other sort of part of the question, the concept designers, at least in my experience, are a lot of the people who are coming up with that really cool creative imagery. They're working a lot in things like Photoshop, just kind of making these renderings of what it might look like. But that's not to say that show set designers aren't also sort of working in a concept design role, because a lot of times things will come up where we need to change something on a ride or something's not working and the director's just saying, you know, that doesn't feel right. And there's always an opportunity there for show set designers to just quickly mock something up, you know, whether it's building a quick model or doing a quick sketch and just saying, you know, here's an idea, you know, what about this? This could work. You know, and I think that kind of goes back to even the last question, which is that, you know, the way work is allocated, there are certain things that are expected of you as a show set designer. So you can't not do what what's expected of you. But I don't think anyone would ever be mad if you, in your own, you know, free time, took a stab at something and just said, you know, what about this idea? You know, something that gets the conversation going. So I hope that sort of answers that question. Michael, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you know, from my perspective, the difference between concept design is the difference between eyewash and like a rendered elevation. Think about that. I mean, an elevation has to have, if it's a real elevation, it's got to have dimensions, it's got to have this, and you've got it figured out. Mm-hmm. Whereas eyewash, you know, if you work in Photoshop or if you work with a pencil or a paintbrush, you're probably a concept artist. And that's the difference. Concept is, we have phases. We have a blue sky phase, and then you go into concept design, which you kind of flush out the idea, and then you go into schematic design, and then you say, well, or feasibility, and then that's the first estimate. And then you say, oh, this thing's going to cost $500 million. Oh, okay, we got to cut quite a bit out of it. So, okay, so then you get that, and then you might be kicked back into blue sky because your idea is great, but it's too expensive, or the ride system doesn't work, or something. So you kind of do a do loop then, but then you get into, once you get past feasibility and they say, okay, it looks like we're in budget. We know this ride system will do what you think it'll do. Okay, that's go forward. Then you get into schematic, and for us, schematic is the worst. We have to have everything figured out at the end of schematic. That tells you where the figures are, where the speakers, you got to know where all the equipment is. You've got to have the ride track set. You've got to have your ride envelope. I mean, you got to have everything figured out. The rest of it's all details, you know? And so, you know, and so your concept artist, at the end of feasibility, theoretically, they should go away and go work on something else, because I met only a couple concept artists who knew how to build anything.
Yeah.
They draw things and you go, okay, how am I gonna build that? And sometimes you can figure it out, but a lot of times you go, I don't know how to make that thing float because it's outside. I don't have anything to hang it from. And you don't want anything coming up from below, and it can't come in from the sides, and it's in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah,
I don't know how to do that, you know? So there's a lot of those. There's very few concept designers that I've seen that will stick with a project and ride it all the way through, as opposed to the show producer who's sort of in charge of the creative budget, and he has to ride all the way through. So yeah, so that's the kind of concept and what we do. Basically, it's like we take these crazy sketches, scale them, and give them real dimensions and real life, real world checks and balances.
That's awesome. That's great. Did you have something you wanted to add, Cory?
No.
All right.
I just noticed that there's a question and answer thing, and there's a lot of questions in there too.
Yes. I do think we only have time for one more, unfortunately, and I have one here in the chat. What are different ways you communicate with other designers / builders / engineers, etc.? Do you all have to know a little bit of everything, or do you all have constant communication between the team?
I usually communicate with a stick if they're within reach. Well, I mean, it's interesting because, you know, I never thought that I could do work sitting in my office at home collaboratively. Never occurred to me that would work. And the toughest thing about it was, usually every one of our attractions, they build a physical model. And we do a virtual model, and we do ride-throughs, and we use Maya, and we use Cinema 4D, and we use all this 3D Studio. We use all these programs to animate. But at the end of the day, we always come back to the physical model. And, you know, it used to be that people thought, oh my gosh, you know, we can model it in computer. We don't need physical models anymore. Well, guess what? It's a different tool. It's not more valuable. It's not less valuable. It's just different. And I think, Cory, I don't remember how long you were on the show before we went virtual. I don't remember, but I remember
I started in February on Moana.
Oh my gosh. So you had the model for a month, and Mark, you didn't have it at all.
January.
Yeah. So it's really hard to bring new people onto a project if you're talking about a physical model that you can't see. And even if you have photographs, and even if you have, you know, a BIM 360 model or a Revit model or whatever time, it's really hard to get people to understand what you have in your head.
Yeah. the physical model a lot for coordination too between each of the disciplines. So you'd have like your little speakers everywhere, or like little dots of where things need to go. So you can be like, oh, well, we can't put something here that we wanted to because this has to go there. And sometimes if the models aren't all talking together, like all of our Revit models, our 3D models, it's really good to see that in the physical model.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of the way that, we communicate as a team, higher level communication, I think, it's interesting. The pandemic definitely made things a little bit different and difficult. It was amazing to see how we were able to work around that. We had always used, and again, this is like high level communication. We always used things like Slack to actually talk to each other. But I would say there was actually something really great about, and anyone, if you've worked in an architectural studio or any kind of studio, you sort of know this, which is that being able to just turn around, and if I can just like look at Cory's computer and just point at something and say, hey, what about this or that? That was really powerful. That was really helpful. So, we would do a lot of communicating. We would always be walking around the building, talking to other engineers, architects, looking for the information we needed to know. And I always really loved that. It's always really fun to work with people like that. So, the pandemic kind of threw a little bit of a wrench into that, but we made the best of it. But then in terms of answering the other part of the question, knowing a little bit of everything, I think, people are still expected to sort of be specialists in what they're doing. So even though I said that they really do love jacks of all trades, it's a complex world where it's hard to be good at everything. And certainly the more things it helps a lot. If you know a little bit about architectural code, and you also know a little bit about landscape design, but you also understand structural engineering and electrical engineering, you're going to be a very powerful Imagineer, because that's the kind of stuff that you have to be consistently thinking about. And, in terms of communication, we're always working together. And I found as a show set designer, it fell on us a lot to talk to all those teams. And it felt, and maybe this was just me, I don't know if this happened to you a lot, Cory, but it felt like a lot of times we were kind of the watchdog who was saying, hold on a second, like electrical engineering, you're trying to put a big conduit here and there's already, an air conditioning valve right there.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying, it's all of a sudden then you're getting those teams together to talk about it and figure it out. So there's a lot of coordination that goes on. So communication in whatever form it is always, it's key. It's really, really important.
Yeah. Like Mark and I have never met in real life.
Yeah, we actually have not. That is crazy.
Mm-hmm. Because we both started, or you started, when did you start on the Moana project? Like right when everything went crazy.
Yeah, it was like March or something maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were on it for like what, 3 weeks?
Yeah, 3-4 weeks or something.
Before for the furloughs and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild.
We need to schedule another call too.
I know
Yeah, a little happy hour.
Yeah.
But yeah, we went very over.
I enjoyed it. I thought that,
Yeah. Sorry.
I thought this was great. As long as we didn't bore you guys to death, I hope you guys get some good, good information out of this. I hope you guys can be inspired and excited about the future.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry about the long slideshow. I didn't really intend to make it that long, but I just kept saying, oh, I got to show that picture.
No,
I got to show that one too. Oh, wait a minute. What about this attraction? And I was ruthless in cutting. 33 years. What can I tell you?
Yeah. I'm sure you could give like a whole week's worth of presentation.
Oh gosh, shoot me now.
Someone was asking for contact information from us. I put mine up. I don't know if there's another way if anyone wants to reach out to us. Should I put on the chat?
I can do that. Let's see.
Chat. Oh, that you do it on chat. Okay.
I'll just put on my stuff here again. Yeah, my LinkedIn is just my name.
There we go. Yeah, if you guys have questions, hopefully we can be, helpful. And I guess I would be remiss if I didn't say that, at least for me, I'm speaking from my, point of view. I obviously can't say I speak for Disney, so I don't want to get sued by Disney. But yeah, it was interesting. So I can definitely, talk to you guys about, my experience there and help you guys out.
Yeah, thank you
Miss
guys
it.
so much for presenting tonight. I know that everyone thought this was super, super valuable. Even Michael, your very long presentation, we liked every single picture. Don't worry. Like,
Thank you. Thank you.
Super, super interesting, super informative. So yeah, thank you guys so much, especially our guests. We hope it was really fun and insightful for all of our attendees tonight, and we look forward to hosting our attendees at our next IDSA events. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you.